I'm Sarah, 28 years old, and after 4 years of relentless saving, I finally bought my dream apartment in downtown Seattle. My parents always praised my independence, while my younger brother Matt seemed to coast through life on their endless generosity. Last Sunday's family dinner took a shocking turn when Matt casually announced he was moving into my apartment. The smile never left my face as I delivered my bombshell response. Growing up in suburban Seattle, our family appeared perfect. From the outside, Dad worked as an engineer, Mom taught high school math, and we lived comfortably in a middle-class neighborhood. But there were always different rules for Matt and me. When I wanted something special, I had to save my allowance and do extra chores. Matt just had to ask, or better yet, throw a tantrum, and somehow he'd get what he wanted. This pattern followed us into adulthood. I worked 2 jobs through college, taking out loans and living on ramen to make ends meet. Matt got a full ride from our parents, which he squandered by partying instead of studying. He dropped out after 2 years, but instead of consequences, he got more support. Community college, paid for. When he dropped out of that too, he got help finding jobs he'd inevitably quit or get fired from. Meanwhile, I graduated with my marketing degree and landed a job at a tech startup. The pay wasn't great initially, but I worked my way up while living in a tiny studio apartment, saving every penny I could. I dreamed of having my own space, something bright and modern with a view of the city I loved. Matt bounced from job to job like he was sampling a buffet. Barista, retail clerk, delivery driver, each position ending with a dramatic story about unfair bosses or toxic coworkers. Never once did he acknowledge his own role in these failures. Through it all, my parents kept bailing him out. Rent money when he came up short, car payments when his credit was too poor to qualify, even paying off his credit cards twice while lecturing him about responsibility. At 26, after years of disciplined saving, I finally had enough for a down payment on a 1-bedroom apartment in a converted warehouse building downtown. The exposed brick walls, floor-to-ceiling windows, and stunning city view made my heart race. The mortgage stretched my budget, but I fell in love with the modern kitchen, the cozy reading nook, and the way the afternoon light flooded through those massive windows. Getting approved for the loan was stressful. Every financial detail was scrutinized, every dollar questioned. When I finally signed the papers and got my keys, I sat in my car crying with relief and joy. This apartment represented every sacrifice I'd made, every night I'd stayed in while friends went out, every vacation I'd skipped, every dollar I'd carefully saved. My parents came to the housewarming party and seemed genuinely proud. Mom helped me arrange furniture while Dad figured out how to mount my TV. They gave me a beautiful plant as a housewarming gift. For once, I felt like my achievements were being celebrated instead of overshadowed by whatever crisis Matt was having. Matt showed up 3 hours late with no gift and spent most of the time complaining about his latest relationship drama to anyone who'd listen. When he finally acknowledged my new place, it was to ask if he could throw a party there, since his current apartment was too cramped for entertaining. I politely declined, which led to a week of passive-aggressive texts about how homeownership had made me stuck up and selfish. The next year and a half were blissful. I painted an accent wall deep blue, bought plants that actually survived, and slowly furnished the place with pieces I loved instead of hand-me-downs. The mortgage was tight, and unexpected expenses sometimes stressed me out, but I managed. Having my own space, my sanctuary, was worth every penny. Matt continued his pattern of instability. He moved in with various girlfriends, then back to cheap apartments when those relationships inevitably failed. He got fired from a coffee shop for giving free drinks to friends, then from a phone store for inventory discrepancies. Each failure came with elaborate excuses about office politics or impossible bosses. 3 months ago, Matt lost his job at a sporting goods store, something about missing inventory again, though his version involved conspiracies and jealous co-workers. The same week, his landlord gave him notice for multiple noise complaints and late rent payments. At 26, my brother was facing unemployment and potential homelessness yet again. I learned about this through Mom, who called to lament how unfair the world was to her youngest child. The conversation ended with odd comments about how family needs to support each other and how your generation should stick together more. I didn't think much of it at the time, too distracted by my own work stress to read between the lines. The warning signs started with unusual phone calls from my parents, 3 separate calls in 1 week instead of our typical Sunday check-in. Each call mentioned vague family matters that needed discussion, but when I asked for details, they deflected with better to talk in person and just some ideas we want to run by you. More concerning were strange texts from Matt. After months of minimal contact, he suddenly wanted to know about my internet speed and which room had the best natural light. When I asked why, he responded with no reason and a smiley emoji. Then came questions about whether the neighbors would mind music at night and if my couch pulled out into a bed. My suspicions grew when Matt asked for the square footage of my apartment and whether there was storage space for extra stuff. I was busy with a major product launch at work and dismissed his odd questions as typical Matt randomness. I had no idea they were part of a calculated plan. That week was particularly stressful. Our startup was launching a new app, and I was pulling late nights managing the marketing campaign. My boss made it clear that this launch was crucial for the company's future, adding pressure to an already demanding situation. On top of that, my apartment's heating system started acting up, requiring an expensive repair that drained my emergency fund. Between the work stress and unexpected expenses, I found myself financially stretched for the first time since buying the apartment. I'd been so focused on making the mortgage payments that I hadn't built up the emergency savings I should have had. When my financial advisor suggested I consider my options, including possibly selling and downsizing, I initially resisted. But as she walked me through the numbers, I realized she was right. The apartment had appreciated significantly since I'd bought it, and I could sell for enough to pay off the mortgage, cover all my debts, and have a healthy down payment for something more manageable. The thought of giving up my dream home was heartbreaking, but continuing on this path would lead to financial disaster. I contacted a colleague who specialized in residential sales. Lisa walked through my apartment with a professional eye and confirmed what my advisor had suggested. I could list it well above what I'd paid and likely get multiple offers. The market was hot, and my building was in high demand. I actually have a couple who just lost a bidding war on a similar unit to buildings over, Lisa mentioned. They're pre-approved and motivated. Would you be interested in a quick sale if they make a good offer? Sometimes the universe sends clear signals. The couple viewed my apartment the next day and submitted an offer 8% above my asking price with a 30-day close. They'd let me rent back for an additional month after closing while I found a new place. The decision was both heartbreaking and obviously correct. I accepted the offer and signed the preliminary paperwork. The inspection was scheduled for the following week, right before our family's traditional Sunday dinner. I decided not to mention the sale yet the deal could still fall through, and I wanted to process my own feelings before dealing with family reactions. The inspection went smoothly with only minor issues. All contingencies were removed by Wednesday, and the sale was moving forward. Closing was set for Friday, just 2 days before Sunday dinner. I'd walk into that meal with the deed transfer complete and a certified check in hand. As Sunday approached, my emotions were complex. Relief about my financial situation mixed with sadness about losing the home I'd loved. Pride in making a mature decision competed with disappointment that my dream had proven unsustainable. And underneath it all was growing unease about Matt's strange questions and my parents' insistent calls about family matters. I chose not to tell them about selling until after closing was complete. This was my decision to make alone, without family input or drama. For once, this was about my needs, not about accommodating others. Sunday dinners at my parents' house had been a tradition since high school. Mom always prepared comfort food. Dad would open a special bottle of wine, and we'd catch up on our lives. These gatherings had a comfortable predictability. This particular Sunday felt different from the moment I walked in. The dining room table was set with the good china instead of our usual casual dishes. A bottle of champagne chilled in an ice bucket, definitely not our typical dinner wine. My parents seemed unusually excited, exchanging meaningful glances and checking the time repeatedly. There she is. Dad called from his chair, standing to give me an unusually enthusiastic hug. Right on time, as always. Our reliable Sarah. Mom emerged from the kitchen, examining my face with concern. Sweetheart, you look tired. Those dark circles under your eyes, you're working too hard. Just a demanding project and some apartment issues, I replied vaguely. Something smells amazing though. Everything's under control. Matt should be here any minute. She exchanged another loaded glance with Dad. Why don't you sit down and relax? 20 minutes after our usual start time, Matt strolled in without apology. But something was different about him. His typical shaggy hair was neatly trimmed. He wore a button-down shirt instead of his usual t-shirt, and he carried a gift bag and a bottle of wine. "Sorry I'm late," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "Traffic was brutal." "Matt, you look so nice," Mom gushed, accepting his offerings. "And you brought wine. How thoughtful. Just wanted to contribute to the celebration," he replied with a wink. That made my skin crawl. When we moved to the dining room, Mom had placed Matt at the head of the table, Dad's usual spot. The seating arrangement, combined with the champagne and formal dishes, made it clear this wasn't a typical family dinner. This was a planned event, and I was the only one not in on it. As we ate Mom's pot roast, the conversation felt stilted and artificial. After a few minutes of awkward silence, Mom began her script. "Sarah, that beautiful apartment of yours must feel awfully empty with just you in it. All that space going unused." I chewed slowly, buying time. "It's perfect for me actually. I use every inch of it." "But surely you get lonely," she persisted. "Such a nice place for one person." Dad jumped in. "Families should stick together during tough times. We need to support each other, especially with the economy being what it is." Matt nodded sagely. "Absolutely. Family first, right?" The meal continued with pointed comments about my apartment, family loyalty, and thinly veiled references to Matt's recent bad luck. I noticed Matt checking his phone repeatedly, apparently waiting for a specific time. The champagne remained unopened, clearly saved for the main event. As Mom served apple pie for dessert, Matt cleared his throat and stood up, reaching for the champagne bottle. "I think it's time we let Sarah in on the good news," he announced, beginning to unwrap the foil. "What good news?" I asked, though a sinking feeling told me I already knew. The cork popped with a festive sound that felt jarringly inappropriate, given the tension I was feeling. Matt poured champagne into 4 flutes Mom had apparently set out in preparation. "Well, as you know, I've had some setbacks recently," Matt began, as if he was about to announce an achievement rather than another handout. "My landlord is being completely unreasonable about the lease, and the job market is brutal right now." I took a small sip of champagne, waiting for the inevitable. "But every cloud has a silver lining," he continued, raising his glass. "Mom, Dad, and I have been talking, and we've come up with the perfect solution, a real win-win scenario." He paused dramatically, clearly savoring his moment in the spotlight. "To new living arrangements," Matt announced, lifting his glass higher. "Starting next Saturday, I'm moving into Sarah's apartment. Just until I get back on my feet, of course." The silence that followed felt eternal. My parents beamed at Matt, then turned expectant smiles toward me, waiting for my enthusiastic endorsement of their plan. Matt's expression was pure entitlement and smug satisfaction. "Mom and Dad said you'd probably prefer having someone around for safety anyway," Matt added when I didn't immediately respond. "Plus, I can help with groceries and maybe clean sometimes." "It's perfect." Mom nodded encouragingly. "We thought it was ideal, honey. Matt needs a stable place while he job hunts, and you have that lovely apartment. Family helping family, and you wouldn't be all alone anymore," Dad added. "It's not safe for a young woman to live alone these days anyway." I looked around the table at their expectant faces. These people had made plans for my home without consulting me. They'd discussed my living arrangements, decided what was best for me, and expected grateful acceptance of their decision. In that moment, a strange calm settled over me. All anxiety about telling them I'd sold the apartment evaporated, replaced by clear certainty that I'd made the right decision. "That's an interesting plan," I said, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling beneath the surface. "There's just one small problem with it." "What's that, honey?" Mom asked, her smile faltering slightly. I reached for my purse and removed the manila envelope containing my closing documents from Friday. "I sold my apartment last week. The new owners take possession in 25 days. The silence that followed was profound. 3 pairs of eyes stared at me in varying states of disbelief. Mom's hand flew to her throat. Dad's eyebrows drew together in confusion. Matt's mouth literally hung open, his champagne glass frozen halfway to his lips. "You're joking, right?" Matt finally broke the silence with a nervous laugh. "This is some kind of weird payback prank." I removed the deed transfer and closing documents, placing them on the table. The inspection was completed Tuesday. All contingencies were removed Wednesday. and we closed Friday afternoon. The new owners are a young couple who are very excited about the city view. Dad picked up the papers, adjusting his reading glasses. His expression darkened as he realized I was telling the truth. Sarah, why would you do something like this without discussing it with your family first? This is a major life decision. The irony wasn't lost on me. You mean the way you all discussed Matt moving into my apartment before informing me? That's completely different, Mom interjected. We were trying to help both of you. How exactly does volunteering my home as a landing pad for Matt help me? Years of resentment seeped through my carefully maintained composure. Matt snatched the papers from Dad, scanning them frantically as if looking for a loophole. You did this on purpose, he accused, slapping the documents down. You heard somehow that I needed a place to stay, and you sold your apartment to spite me. Not everything is about you, Matt, I replied, keeping my voice level with effort. I sold my apartment because it was becoming a financial burden. The heating repair alone cost $3,000 I didn't have. Money I don't have because, unlike you, I don't have parents who bail me out of every crisis. That's unfair, Sarah, Dad said sternly. We've always supported both our children equally. A bitter laugh escaped me. Equally, Dad? I worked 2 jobs to pay for college while you gave Matt a free ride, which he wasted. I saved for years to buy that apartment while you paid Matt's rent whenever he came up short. Your brother has had a harder time finding his path, Mom defended, tears welling. He needs more support. And whose fault is that? I challenged. You've been supporting his bad decisions for so long that he's never had to face consequences or grow up. Matt pushed back from the table, his chair scraping loudly. I don't have to listen to this sanctimonious crap. You've always thought you were better than me, Sarah. Miss Perfect with her marketing career and her downtown apartment. I don't think I'm better than you, I said quietly. I just made different choices and worked hard for what I have. What I had, I corrected myself, the reality hitting again. Well, your choices have screwed me over, Matt spat. I already gave notice at my apartment. I have to be out by the end of the month, and now I have nowhere to go, Mom gasped. Matt, you already gave notice? We said to wait until after we talked to Sarah. Matt had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I was being proactive. The landlord was hassling me about the noise complaints, so I figured why pay rent for another month when I could move in with Sarah. You assumed I would just welcome you with open arms, I said, the full extent of his entitlement dawning on me. You made a life decision based on access to my apartment, which you never bothered to ask me about, because you would have said no. Matt shouted. You've always been selfish. Enough. Dad's sharp command silenced the room. This is getting us nowhere. Sarah, is there any way you can back out of this sale? I stared at him in disbelief. Are you seriously asking me to cancel a legal contract, potentially get sued, and definitely lose my earnest money, just so Matt can have a free place to crash? We could help with the repair costs, Mom offered quickly, and maybe chip in for utilities while Matt stays with you. The sale is final, I said firmly. And even if it weren't, I wouldn't cancel it for this reason. Matt is 26 years old. He needs to solve his own housing crisis. Matt stormed toward the door. Thanks for the support, sis. Really feeling the family love right now. Let him go, Mom, I said warily as she started to follow him. He needs to cool down. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. Mom sank back into her chair, tears flowing freely. How could you do this to your brother? He's going to be homeless. He's not going to be homeless, I countered. He has options. He could find a roommate situation, rent a studio, or even stay with you and Dad temporarily while he figures things out. Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. Mom looked away. We would offer, of course, but we just converted Matt's old room into my craft space, Mom said quickly. And the guest room is more of a storage space now. You still have the living room couch, I pointed out. Or you could make space. The point is, Matt has options that don't involve me sacrificing my financial security. The conversation continued in circles for another hour. My parents alternated between guilt trips about family loyalty and suggestions for how I could still accommodate Matt despite selling my apartment. Each suggestion made it clear that in their eyes, my resources would always be viewed as a potential safety net for Matt. Finally, I gathered my things. I need to go. I have showings tomorrow, and I need to start looking for a new place. Sarah, please, Mom began, but I cut her off. I love you both, but I can't keep having the same conversation. Matt is an adult, and his housing situation is not my responsibility. I hope you'll help him find a realistic solution, but I need to focus on my own transition right now. Dad walked me to the door in silence. As I turned to say goodbye, he surprised me by pulling me into a tight hug. I'm proud of you, he whispered, even when I don't understand your decisions. It was a small acknowledgement, but in that moment, it meant everything. The days following that disastrous dinner were filled with a barrage of texts and calls from family members. Matt led the charge with angry messages that evolved from "I can't believe you would do this to me" to detailed explanations of how I'd apparently ruined his life. My parents employed different tactics, attempting to negotiate as if we were discussing a business deal rather than a fundamental boundary issue. Extended family members began weighing in too. My aunt called to express disappointment in my lack of family values, and my cousin sent a lengthy email about how letting his brother crash with him had strengthened their bond. None of them acknowledged the fundamental difference. Those arrangements had been mutual agreements, not unilateral declarations. Throughout this pressure campaign, I continued the practical work of preparing for my move. The buyers had agreed to let me rent back the apartment for a month after closing, giving me time to find a new place. The certified check from the sale sat in a high-yield savings account, providing financial security I'd never experienced before. Working with Lisa, I began viewing smaller apartments in more affordable neighborhoods. After years of stretching myself thin for the dream apartment, I found the prospect of a simpler living situation surprisingly appealing. A cozy one-bedroom with lower monthly costs represented a different kind of freedom. One afternoon, while signing a lease on a charming apartment in a converted house, my phone buzzed with a text from Matt. "We need to talk. Coming over after work." I considered telling him not to come, but decided it might be better to have this conversation face to face. When I got home, Matt was sitting on the building's front steps. "Nice of you to let me know you were coming," I said, letting us into the building. My apartment was half packed, with labeled boxes stacked against walls and artwork removed, leaving ghostly rectangles on the painted surfaces. Matt looked around with a frown. "So you're really going through with this?" He said, not a question but an accusation. "The apartment is already sold, Matt. The new owners take possession in 20 days. I set my purse down and crossed my arms. "What did you want to talk about?" Matt ran a hand through his hair, a stressed gesture he'd inherited from Dad. "Mom and Dad said I should apologize for how I acted at dinner." "So, sorry about that, I guess." The half-hearted apology hung in the air between us. "Is that all you came to say?" "No," he admitted, dropping onto my couch without invitation. "I came to see if we could work something out. I'm in a real bind here, Sarah. My landlord won't renew my lease no matter what, and I have to be out by the end of the month. That's unfortunate, but it doesn't change my situation," I replied, remaining standing. "The apartment is sold. I'm moving to a one-bedroom that barely fits my own stuff." "What about a loan then?" Matt asked, leaning forward. "Just enough for first and last month's rent and security deposit. I'll pay you back as soon as I find a new job." The familiar pattern threatened to repeat itself. Jake in trouble, family expected to rescue him, promises of repayment that would never materialize. For a moment, I considered it. The money from the sale meant I could afford to help without significant hardship, but then I remembered every previous loan that had become a gift, every promise to do better that had evaporated once the crisis passed. "No, Matt, I'm not going to loan you money," I said firmly. "You've had plenty of chances to build emergency savings, but you choose to spend everything immediately. Must be nice to be so perfect," he sneered, any pretense of contrition vanishing. "Some of us have had bad luck." "This isn't about luck," I said, my patience wearing thin. "This is about choices and consequences. You chose to violate your lease terms repeatedly. You chose to spend money on concerts and trips instead of saving. Now you're facing the consequences, so you're just going to let me be homeless." Matt stood up, his voice rising. "Your own brother? You have options that don't involve me," I pointed out. "You could ask friends for a couch to crash on. You could look for a room to rent, which would be cheaper than your own place. You could even stay with Mom and Dad temporarily." "None of those are real options," Matt insisted. "My friends all have small places. Roommate situations are for college kids, and Mom and Dad's house is in the middle of nowhere." I couldn't help but laugh at his definition of nowhere. Our parents lived in the same suburban neighborhood where we'd grown up, just 30 minutes from downtown. "Those all sound like real options to me," I said. They're just not as comfortable as moving into my apartment would have been. That's the difference, Matt. You don't want any solution that requires sacrifice or discomfort. You've changed, he accused, grabbing his jacket. Ever since you bought this place, you've been different. Like you think you're better than the rest of us. I haven't changed, I said quietly. I've just stopped apologizing for having boundaries. Maybe it's time you changed, Matt. Maybe losing your apartment is the wake-up call you need. Whatever helps you sleep at night, he spat, heading for the door. Have fun in your tiny new place while I figure out how to avoid living on the street. As the door slammed behind him, I sank onto the couch and closed my eyes. The confrontation had been unpleasant but necessary. For the first time, I'd refused to be drawn into the drama that always surrounded Matt. I'd maintained my boundaries despite the emotional manipulation. The next morning brought a text from Dad, "Your mother and I have been talking. Matt will stay in the guest room until he finds a place. We'd appreciate help clearing out some storage to make space." It was a small victory, but significant. For the first time, my parents were stepping up to help Matt in a way that didn't involve imposing on me. Maybe they were finally beginning to understand the difference between supporting and enabling. Moving day arrived with the usual mix of exhaustion and excitement that accompanies major life changes. Professional movers systematically dismantled my life in the dream apartment, loading everything into a truck destined for a space less than half the size. As the movers worked, I wandered through increasingly empty rooms, saying goodbye to the place that had meant so much to me. Each room held memories: the living room where I'd hosted friends for game nights, the kitchen where I'd learned to cook elaborate meals, the bedroom where I'd spent countless mornings reading in the perfect light from those floor-to-ceiling windows. When the last box was loaded, I did a final walkthrough with the new owners. The young couple was visibly excited, already discussing where their furniture would go and how they'd use the space. Their enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself sharing in their joy. My apartment would become their home, and there was something beautiful about that continuation. The first few weeks in my new place were an adjustment. The apartment was in a converted Victorian house with original hardwood floors, high ceilings, and charming details like built-in bookcases and a clawfoot tub. It was cozy rather than sleek, homey instead of modern. The rent was less than half what I'd been paying, leaving me with breathing room I hadn't experienced since buying the downtown apartment. What surprised me most was the immediate financial relief. After paying off the remaining mortgage and setting aside money for taxes, I had enough to clear all outstanding debts and establish a healthy emergency fund. My monthly expenses dropped dramatically. For the first time in years, I could look at my bank account without anxiety. Meanwhile, my family was undergoing their own adjustment. According to occasional updates from Mom, having Matt back home was challenging. "He stays out until all hours," she complained during one call, "and leaves dishes in the sink even though I've asked him a dozen times to clean up after himself." I listened sympathetically but resisted saying "I told you so." This was a lesson my parents needed to learn for themselves. The real surprise came a month later when Dad called with unexpected news. "Your brother has a job interview tomorrow," he announced with cautious optimism. "An actual professional position at a marketing firm downtown. He asked me to help him prepare." "That's great," I replied, genuinely pleased. "What changed?" "Well," Dad said with a chuckle, "your mother implemented some house rules. Rent due on the first of the month, chores assigned weekly, and a curfew on weeknights." Matt pitched a fit at first, but when she stood firm and I backed her up, he realized we were serious. "Mom is charging him rent?" I couldn't keep the shock from my voice. "Not much," Dad admitted, "just enough to give him some responsibility. We're putting the money aside to help him with a security deposit when he finds his own place, but he doesn't know that part." 2 weeks later, Matt got the job and started the following Monday. When we gathered for our first family dinner since the confrontation, the atmosphere was cordial if strained. Matt, dressed in business casual attire, announced his new position. With unusual humility, "It's entry level," he explained, "but there's room for advancement if I prove myself." "That's wonderful, Matt," I said sincerely. "Your marketing background should help." He nodded, meeting my eyes briefly. It wasn't an apology, but it was acknowledgement, recognition that things were changing between us. After dinner, while helping Mom clear the table, she pulled me into an unexpected hug. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "Your father and I have been talking, and we realize we haven't been fair to either of you." We expected too little of Matt and too much of you. The acknowledgement brought tears to my eyes. Thanks, Mom. That means a lot. It hasn't been easy having him back home, she continued with a rueful smile, but it's been good for all of us. I think your father and I are learning to set boundaries we should have established years ago. Over the following months, a new family dynamic slowly emerged. Matt found an affordable apartment near his new job. It was small and far from luxurious, but it was his earned through his own efforts. When he hosted a modest housewarming party, I brought a plant and a gift card to a nearby grocery store. Thanks for coming, he said awkwardly as I was leaving. I know things have been weird between us. Family is complicated, I replied with a smile. But we're figuring it out. For what it's worth, he added, hands shoved in his pockets. I get it now why you were so protective of your independence. I shouldn't have expected you to sacrifice what you worked for just because I made poor choices. It wasn't a grand apology, but from Matt, it was significant progress. I appreciate that. And for what it's worth, I'm proud of what you're building. For yourself, as fall turned to winter, I settled comfortably into my new life. My apartment had become home, decorated with favorite pieces from my old place and new additions that suited the Victorian charm. My financial situation had stabilized completely, allowing me to focus on building my career rather than just paying bills. With the proceeds from the sale invested wisely, I began casually looking at properties again, but with a more realistic perspective. The dream apartment had taught me valuable lessons about the difference between what I wanted and what I needed, between status and security. My relationship with my family continued to evolve. My parents, seeing positive changes in Matt's life, began to understand the damage their enabling had caused. They still supported both of us, but in healthier ways that acknowledged our adulthood and autonomy. Matt and I would never be best friends, but we were learning mutual respect instead of resentment and entitlement. One evening, as I sat in my reading nook watching snow fall outside my window, I received an unexpected text from Matt. Got my first performance bonus today. Taking myself out to celebrate. Never thought I'd say this, but thanks for not letting me move in. Needed the kick in the pants. I smiled at the message, feeling a complex mix of emotions. The path to this moment had been painful for all of us, but perhaps necessary. Sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most important growth. Sometimes losing what you thought you wanted opens the door to what you truly need. 6 months after selling my dream apartment, I realized I'd gained something far more valuable than the perfect city view or exposed brick walls. I'd found financial security, family relationships based on respect rather than obligation, and the knowledge that I could make difficult decisions and stick to them even when everyone else disagreed. The townhouse I eventually bought was modest, but perfect for my needs: to bedrooms, a small yard, and monthly payments that left room for savings and the occasional vacation. It wasn't my dream home in the traditional sense, but it represented something better. A life built on wisdom rather than wishful thinking, on boundaries rather than endless accommodation. True security, I'd learned, came not from impressive possessions, but from wise choices, healthy boundaries, and authentic relationships. The journey had been difficult, but the destination proved worth every painful step. In losing my dream apartment, I'd found a dream life, one grounded in reality and built to last.